In the heart of Tokyo, hidden beneath neon lights and morning bell chimes, there's a school where time runs normally for most, except for one room sealed in silence. They say it's just storage. They say the girl who died there was forgotten. But the phone rings anyway, always at 3:15 a.m., always with no number, always with the same static and the same voice. It hurts. I didn't mean to fall. This is not a ghost story from the past. This is the voice of the present, a voice that calls when no one is listening, a voice that warns too late. Tonight we follow Ayumi, a counselor new to these halls, pulled into a curse stitched together by silence, grief, and forgotten cries. Welcome to Voicemail from Classroom B3, where every message is a whisper from the other side, and some might be your own. The school stood quietly in the early morning haze, tucked between convenience stores, narrow alleys, and a small Shinto shrine that no one visited anymore. It was just another ordinary high school in Tokyo. 4 stories, faded blue tiles, and windows that hummed when the trains passed nearby. A place where time moved in periods, where laughter echoed during lunch, and where students scribbled notes half asleep before exams. But beneath the ordinary, something slept, and it was waiting. Ayumi Hayasaka stepped off the train at exactly 7:02 a.m., clutching her canvas tote bag tightly against her coat. Her breath fogged the cold air. A neat brown bob framed her youthful but tired face, dark circles under her eyes, softened only by the faintest trace of blush. 28, freshly certified and just assigned to Kuroyama High School as the new student counselor. She had dreamed of this job for years, helping others, listening, making a difference. But as she walked past the gates for the first time, there was something she couldn't explain. It was faint, like a wrong note in a perfect melody. The school looked normal, ordinary even. Rows of shoes in cubbies, the scent of chalk and old wood, the rhythmic buzz of fluorescent lights. But in the back of her mind, a chill lingered, as if something inside the building had turned slightly to watch her enter. Her office was small but warm, tucked beside the nurse's room, with a narrow window that faced the rear courtyard. She decorated it carefully, succulents by the sill, calming blue-gray tones, books lined up by theme, anxiety, grief, self-esteem. She even hung a tiny wind chime above the doorway, a charm, maybe, a comfort. The first week passed in a blur of introductions. The teachers were polite but distant, like they had all agreed to keep conversations on the surface. The students were shy, some curious. No major issues, no warning signs. It felt peaceful. Until Tuesday night. Ayumi stirred in bed, cold sweat on her back. The room was dark, save for the blinking orange light of her humidifier. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. She groaned, half asleep, reached over and picked it up. Voicemail received. Time, 3:15 a.m. No caller ID. She blinked. Odd. She played the message without thinking, curiosity winning over common sense. At first there was only static, a slow, low hiss. Then a faint clicking sound, like something brushing against a microphone. Then a whisper, soft, distant, words barely formed. Ayumi, yameru, itai, mama. Ayumi froze. She couldn't understand all of it, but the tone pierced straight into her. A child's voice, young, in pain, crying softly in the background like someone trying not to be heard. She sat up, staring at the screen. There was no number, no option to call back. The message ended with a long, breathy silence. Then, click. She couldn't sleep after that. By morning, she had convinced herself it was some glitch, a prank, a wrong number. Tokyo was full of those. Maybe some late-night drunk dial. Maybe a student's joke. Maybe... No, it wasn't a joke. The tone stayed with her. That sadness, that fragile, shivering breath at the end, that voice. At school, Ayumi asked around casually, "Do you ever get prank calls at night?" she asked the math teacher while making tea. "Not really," he said, without looking up. "Why?" "Just wondering." She tried again later with the front desk assistant. "Do we get many students with mental health issues?" she asked. The woman gave her a strange look. "Not officially," she said. "Why do you ask?" "Not officially." The day moved on. At 3:15 a.m. that night, her phone buzzed again. Another message. Same thing. No number, just static. And then, "Sensei, kawaii, shikata nai yo." Ayumi sat upright in bed. The voice was shaking now, pleading, louder than before. When it ended, the phone stayed lit for just a moment longer than it should have, almost like it wanted her to say something back. The next morning, Ayumi did what any rational person would do. She recorded the voicemail and brought it to school. During lunch, she played it on her phone for one of the older teachers, Mr. Nakatani, who had been kind enough to lend her advice during her first week. They sat together in the faculty room. The others were gone. As the message played, his eyes sharpened. His tea paused mid-air. When it ended, he set the cup down without drinking. And in a low voice, he asked, "Where did you get that?" She told him, the anonymous voicemails, always at 3:15 a.m. He was quiet for a long time. Then, after a moment, "Did you hear a name in the background?" Ayumi thought back. "I think, maybe, Mizuki." His face paled. "Don't ever play that again. And if anyone asks, you never got that message." "Wait, what? Who's Mizuki?" But he was already walking out. Ayumi sat alone in the lounge. The wind outside tapped gently against the windows, and somewhere down the hallway a door creaked softly open, then closed. She couldn't stop thinking about it. That name, that voice, that fear in Mr. Nakatani's face. She searched the school database. No Mizuki currently enrolled. She searched Ains News archives. Nothing recent. She checked old yearbooks in the library, page by page. Then, on the back row of the third year, 6 years ago, there she was, Mizuki Endo, age 17. Soft smile, eyes downcast, barely noticeable. No mention of her after that. Except, in the attendance records, her name was crossed out in red. No cause listed, just a note, withdrawn due to circumstances. Date, March 15th. That night, the voicemail came earlier, 3:14 a.m. "I didn't want to fall. I just wanted someone to see me." Ayumi sat in the dark, holding her phone like it might break her. The voice was clearer now, and it knew her name. The next morning, Ayumi stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror longer than usual. Her eyes looked sunken, haunted by the voice that now echoed in her memory like a forgotten lullaby. "I didn't want to fall." The words kept crawling back through her chest like cold fingers. She tried splashing water on her face, tying her scarf tighter, pushing through routine like it meant something. But there was something different about the air that day. Everything felt dimmer, like the light outside had dulled slightly, even though the sky was blue. She checked her phone one last time before heading out. No number, no trace, just the voicemail. Still sitting there, still whispering, still waiting. She arrived early at Kuroyama High, earlier than usual, maybe to prove to herself that everything was fine, that she was imagining things, that Mizuki was just a name in an old yearbook, that coincidences existed. The staff room was empty, still and silent, like a photograph. Ayumi walked slowly through the halls, heels clicking gently on the tiles. Classroom doors were still closed. The faint scent of floor wax lingered in the air. At the far end of the corridor, past the stairwell, she noticed a door she hadn't really looked at before. It had no classroom number, just a sign taped across it. Storage. Do not enter. The handle was locked. Dust covered the floor just outside it. And yet, there were faint scratches near the base of the door, as if someone had once pounded or clawed at it, not in rage, in desperation. Back in her office, Ayumi tried to focus. Students would start arriving soon. She reviewed her schedule. 2 private sessions and 1 classroom observation. Normal things, grounding things. But the whispers wouldn't leave her alone. She pulled up the voicemail again, put in earbuds, and hit play. The static was heavier this time, layered, breathing. It felt almost wet, like Wayne in an empty hallway. Then the whisper came. "Are you listening yet?" Ayumi's heart skipped. That hadn't been in the message before. She rewound, listened again. "Are you listening yet?" It was there, and it was directed at her. At lunch, Ayumi walked to the library to speak with Ms. Takahara, the school's librarian. The woman was in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair tied in a tight bun, and a voice like dry paper. "I was wondering," Ayumi began carefully, "do you know what happened in classroom B3? The librarian paused, one hand resting on a stack of old catalog cards. "There is no B3, she said simply. "I saw the door, at the end of the hall near the west stairs. That room is closed, for storage, old desks maybe. But was it ever used before?" Miss Takahara didn't answer at first. Then she looked up slowly. "There are some places that are better left closed. We seal doors for a reason, Hayasaka-sensei. Not everything needs to be opened." That afternoon, Ayumi met with a second-year student named Saki. Shy, always looking at the floor, fingernails chewed. The topic was anxiety during exams, but halfway through the session, the girl suddenly asked, "Sensei, is it true someone died here?" Ayumi blinked. "Why do you ask?" "I just heard some of the older students talking. They said a girl jumped from the 3rd floor a long time ago." Ayumi tried to keep her voice calm. "Do you remember her name?" Saki shook her head. "They said she was quiet, and no one knew she was gone until they found her bag sitting on the desk." That night, Ayumi couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her apartment, the voicemail playing again and again. She ran the audio through her laptop's editing software, boosting the treble, isolating the background noise, scanning for voices buried beneath the static. She found 3. The first was the crying. The second was her own name. And the third was music, a school chime, the kind that played at the beginning of class. But it was distorted, playing backwards, slowed down, off-key, and layered under it something metallic, a click, like an old phone flipping shut. She reached out to her university friend Kaoru, who now works in telecommunications. They met for coffee the next day. Ayumi played the voicemail, let Kaoru listen on a pair of noise-canceling headphones. When it finished, Kaoru removed the headphones and frowned. "Where'd you get this?" "It was sent to me, late at night. No number." Kaoru scrolled through the metadata. "There's no origin ID. That's weird. Every call has a signature, even if it's blocked. Could it be a spoofed signal?" "Maybe, but there's no data at all. No timestamp. It's almost like the phone made the message by itself." Ayumi's skin prickled. That night, she dreamed of a classroom, not her own. Old, yellowed curtains, desks with scratches on them, a blackboard smeared with chalk dust. No students, no teachers. Just her, standing alone at the front of the room. And behind her, someone whispered, "Don't turn around." She turned anyway and woke up screaming. At 3:15 a.m., the voicemail came again. This time, there was no static, just silence for the first 10 seconds. Then, "He's the one who watched me fall. He smiled and said nothing." The voice cracked near the end, dissolving into sobs. Ayumi pressed the phone to her chest. Who is he? At school, she ran into Mr. Nakatani again. She asked him directly, "Who is Mizuki?" He didn't answer. "I know something happened in classroom B3. I know you heard her name. Please, I'm trying to help." He sighed, slowly, then spoke without looking at her. "She was in my homeroom 6 years ago. Quiet, polite, average grades." He paused. "She came to me once, asked if she could switch seats, said she didn't feel safe." "From who?" He was silent. She never asked again. Ayumi clenched her fists. What happened to her? He looked at her with hollow eyes. She jumped, or so they said, but there was no note, no goodbye, just a sound in the morning, and a silence that no one wanted to explain. Ayumi walked the corridors after school ended. She found herself at the door again, classroom B3. She stared at the faded letters on the storage sign. The handle was still locked, the dust undisturbed. And yet, she could swear, this time, she heard a voice whisper just behind the door. Ayumi-sensei. Not screamed, not moaned, just whispered, soft, like a child calling for their mother from beneath the blanket. She stepped back, heart pounding. Behind the door, something shifted, something small, slow, waiting. That night, the voicemail came again, but the voice had changed. This time, it was Ayumi's own voice. Breathless, trembling, sobbing. "I should have left. I should have never opened that door." By the third week, Ayumi stopped checking the time. She already knew when it would come. 3:15 a.m. Like clockwork, like ritual. The messages no longer shocked her. They unsettled her, yes, but in the way a nightmare lingers even after you're awake. She'd play them in the dark, headphones in, back against the wall, heart in her throat. She didn't know if she was trying to understand the voice or waiting for it to say something she feared. I should have never opened that door. That was her voice, her own voice, But she had never said those words, not aloud, not even in thought. She played the voicemail over and over, studying the tone, the breath, the soft gasp at the end. It was her, without question. But it was also someone else, the same way a mirror reflects you until it doesn't. At school, Ayumi's days were filled with small talk and paperwork, meetings with students and short greetings with staff. But behind the surface, she could feel something growing beneath the walls, like ivy crawling just under the paint. Whispers in the hallway after school. Lights flickering in room 22 during homeroom. A girl in the bathroom crying, but no one was there. She was hearing more than she should, or perhaps hearing exactly what had always been there. During one of her rare shared lunches in the faculty lounge, Ayumi finally approached the older teacher again, Mr. Nakatani. His posture was hunched, his tie slightly loosened, his tea gone cold in front of him. "I need to know," she said softly. He looked up from his untouched bento, tired. "Why now?" he asked. "Why bring this up again after so many years?" "Because it's not over." She tapped her phone gently on the table. "She's still calling." A silence stretched between them. Then he sighed. "I remember the name Mizuki like a wound you can't stop picking," he began. "She was in class 3B, soft-spoken, alone most of the time. Her mother was sick, I think. Her father rarely came to meetings." He rubbed the edge of his napkin across the corner of his tea. "One day, she just stopped talking. Completely. Not angry. Just like someone had unplugged the cord." "And no one did anything?" "I tried," he said, a little too quickly. "But you know what schools are like. We file reports, we call guardians who never answer, we tell ourselves we're doing something." Ayumi's voice was low. "Did she ever come to you?" He nodded. "Once, she asked me if souls can get stuck in places." Ayumi blinked. "What did you say?" "I told her not to worry about such things, that she should focus on her exams." He laughed bitterly under his breath. "She thanked me, bowed, smiled. And the next morning, she was gone." He leaned in closer now, eyes darker than before. "There was a rumor, Ayumi-sensei, that the classroom held something it shouldn't, that her seat was never moved, that her desk was still marked, just a faint stain no one could clean." "Blood?" "No," he whispered. "A handprint, child-sized, on the inside of the window." Ayumi's throat tightened. "I asked the school to cleanse the room, just in case. They refused, said it would draw attention." He paused. "So they locked the door, called it a storage room, and left everything inside, including the desk." That night, Ayumi waited for the voicemail, but it didn't come. For the first time in 8 nights, her phone stayed silent at 3:15 a.m. She lay awake anyway, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a sound that never arrived. Somehow, that was worse. The next day, the school felt different, not colder, but heavier, like the air had thickened with something unspoken. In the hallway near the 3rd floor west wing, just outside the sealed classroom B3, Ayumi saw a girl standing still, not moving, not blinking, just standing there. A second-year student, hair tied neatly, uniform perfect. Ayumi approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't answer, just stared at the door behind her. "I think you're in the wrong wing," Ayumi said gently. Still no response. Ayumi touched her shoulder, and the girl turned suddenly, eyes wide, and whispered. She was screaming, but no one opened the door. Then she walked away, without another word. Ayumi stood frozen. The hallway lights flickered once, then returned to normal. Later that evening, Ayumi found herself alone in the school library. She wasn't sure why she stayed late. Maybe because she didn't want to go home. Maybe because the school, despite its shadows, was starting to feel more familiar than her own apartment. She pulled out the old yearbook again. Mizuki Endo. Her photo sat at the bottom right corner of the page, the same expression, quiet, hesitant, as if she didn't want to be remembered. But this time, Ayumi noticed something new. Just below Mizuki's name, someone had etched tiny letters with a pen, so faint they were nearly invisible. B3 equals Baka-san. She frowned. Baka meant fool, but in this context, it might have meant something else. She took the book to Miss Kakahara, the librarian. The older woman went still the moment she saw the page. "You shouldn't look too long at that photo," she murmured. "Why?" "Because once you see her properly, she starts seeing you back." Ayumi returned to her office shaken, and that night, the voicemail came again, but not at 3:15. It came at 3:13. Early. It began with soft humming, a lullaby, off-key. Then, "Sensei, are you finally listening now?" A pause. "Do you know what they called me? A ghost before I even died." The message ended with the sound of breathing right next to her ear. The next morning, Ayumi checked the voicemail log again, but there was no entry, no timestamp, no file, only her call history. 3:13 a.m., outgoing call 000. She hadn't called anyone, but the log said she did, and it listed the location. Origin, classroom B3. The sign was still there. Storage, do not enter. Faded tape, curling at the corners. The ink smudged by time, humidity, and perhaps something more intentional, like someone wanted the name of the room to disappear completely. Ayumi stood in front of the sealed door, alone in the third-floor west corridor. Her footsteps echoed behind her, soft and uneven, the sound deadened by dust that hadn't been swept in years. She glanced behind her. No students, no teachers, just the silence. It was the kind of silence that listens back. She tried the handle, still locked. But this time, she leaned closer and pressed her ear gently to the wood. For a moment, nothing. Then, a faint tap. Not from her side, from inside. 3 slow knocks, spaced evenly, as if responding to a question she hadn't asked out loud. Ayumi stumbled backward, heart thudding against her ribs. She waited. 1 breath, then 2. The hallway remained empty. The door stayed shut. But something had just knocked from a room that was supposed to be empty. She didn't go back to class that afternoon. Instead, she sat in her office, staring at her phone, scrolling through every file, every voicemail, every timestamp. None of them existed anymore. Not a single saved message, no call log, no metadata. Everything was gone. But she remembered each one, every cry, every whisper, every word like a soft nail tapping against the walls of her mind. And the most recent one, Origin, classroom B3. She hadn't imagined it. She was sure. That room was speaking to her. By evening, the halls were empty. The last teachers had left. The lights dimmed to night mode, casting yellow shadows across the linoleum floors. Ayumi stayed behind. She wasn't sure what she was doing. It wasn't bravery, not exactly. It was need, a pull, like an itch you can't reach, somewhere beneath the skin of the school. She made her way back up to the third floor. Quietly, soft shoes, slow steps, phone light off. She brought a paper clip with her, bent and twisted. She had Googled how to pick simple classroom locks. Her hands trembled, but her breath was steady. One click, then another, and then the lock gave way with a soft snap. She opened the door to classroom B3, and the cold air hit her like a wall. Not icy, not winter cold, just empty, like nothing had breathed in this room for a long time. Dust floated in long, slow spirals through the flashlight beam. Desks still stood in rows, old-fashioned ones, metal-legged, scarred by years of student carvings. The chalkboard was smeared in faded white. One window was cracked. The curtains hung limp, as though wind had forgotten them. But there was no mold, no cobwebs. It wasn't abandoned. It was preserved. In the far right corner, one desk stood apart from the others, pushed back, alone. Ayumi walked slowly toward it, flashlight low. The wood was darker than the others, stained, and carved into the surface deep, angry scratches. At first, it looked like nonsense, but when Ayumi leaned in, she could just make out the words beneath the overlapping cuts. Nobody hears me. I'm still here. And one more, shapier than the rest. I laughed when I fell. Beneath the desk, an old flip phone, dusty, closed, black. Ayumi stared at it. It shouldn't have power, but as she reached down and picked it up, the screen lit up. One new voicemail. Inbox, 1 of 1. Date, 03/15, 3:15 a.m. From unknown. Her thumb hovered over the play button, and against her better judgment, she pressed it. Static, then silence, then a voice. It hurts. I didn't mean to fall. A pause. Sensei, please tell them I didn't jump. The message ended. The phone flickered, then powered off completely. Dead. She tried to turn it back on, but it was cold now, lifeless, like it had only turned on long enough to deliver the message. One message, meant only for her. She turned toward the chalkboard. Something had been written beneath the dust. She brushed it clean with her sleeve. 4 characters in faint chalk. Miteru hito ga ita. Someone was watching. A loud crash echoed behind her. Ayumi spun, heart in her throat. But the room was empty. No one was there. Just a chair fallen sideways near the door, though she hadn't touched it. She stepped backward, and that's when she noticed the windows. All 3 of them had fogged from the inside. And on the center pane, a handprint, small, child-sized, pressed from within. Ayumi fled the room,
slamming the door shut behind her. She twisted the lock back into place and backed away down the hall, trying to breathe, trying to think, not to look back. But as she turned the corner, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. One new voicemail. Time, 3:15 a.m. But it wasn't even midnight yet. She didn't press play. Not yet. Not there. Back at home, she sat in the dark again, the phone in her hand like a live thing. She finally pressed play. At first, just static. Then, her own voice again. I saw her. I saw what happened, and I said nothing. The voice broke. I became just like them. Ayumi set the phone down. She didn't remember recording that, but the voice was hers, her cadence, her guilt, her confession. Outside, the wind howled softly against the window, and just beneath it came the sound of a second voice whispering from the speaker of the old flip phone she had locked inside her desk drawer. You opened the door. Now you have to listen.
The phone stayed locked in Ayumi's desk drawer. She didn't tell anyone she had taken it. Not the school, not Mr. Nakatani, not even Kaoru, who had offered to help trace the mysterious messages. Somehow, Ayumi knew, deep in her bones, that the flip phone wasn't meant to be found. Not again. And yet, it had waited, patiently, as if expecting her. She'd taken it home wrapped in a scarf, avoiding security cameras, hugging her coat close as she slipped out the west exit after dark. She didn't feel like a thief. She felt like a witness carrying evidence no one would believe. That night, Ayumi sat on the floor of her apartment, the flip phone placed in front of her like a shrine offering. The device was ancient. Black casing, scratches along the hinge, a faint sticker of a cartoon bunny on the back, worn to near invisibility. She plugged it into an old USB charger she found buried in a drawer. The screen flickered to life. Charging. 7%. No SIM, no contacts, no messages, except one. Voicemail. Saved. 1. The same message from before. It hurts. I didn't mean to fall. She played it again, and this time, something was different. Near the end, after the words trailed off and the static returned, there was a new sound. Not a voice, not breathing. A distant school bell. Not like the ones at Kudoyama High. Older, deeper, and then layered underneath, footsteps, soft, approaching. The message ended abruptly, as if someone or something had interrupted it before it could finish. Ayumi opened the phone's settings. The date of the voicemail was listed as March 15th, 6 years ago, 3:15 a.m., the same moment Mitsuki died. But that didn't make sense. The flip phone should have run out of power years ago. It had no SIM, no reception, no internet connection. It shouldn't be working at all. And yet it did. Only for that message. She scrolled through the phone's calendar. It was blank, except for a recurring reminder every March 15th. Don't forget her. Ayumi called Kaoru the next morning. I need to trace the origin of a file, she said carefully. Is this about the voicemail again? Kaoru asked, voice cautious. Yes, but not from my phone, from another. She brought the flip phone to Kaoru's office downtown, in a sterile gray tech lab filled with wires, screens, and machines that hummed without apology. Kaoru looked at the phone and blinked. This thing's prehistoric. I know,
but just try." Kaoru extracted the audio and ran it through multiple programs, frequency analysis, metadata scrapes, timestamp integrity checks. Everything came back corrupted. No GPS, no signal source, the timestamp doesn't match the internal clock, and listen to this. She isolated the final 3 seconds of the voicemail, boosted it, slowed it. A whisper emerged, garbled, drenched in static, but unmistakably a name. Hayasaka. Ayumi's blood ran cold. "That's your name, isn't it?" Kaoru said slowly. She nodded, unable to speak. "But if this was recorded 6 years ago?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Ayumi took the phone home again. She left it on her nightstand, screen closed. But in the dead of night, it lit up on its own. 3:15 a.m. New voicemail. The sound woke her. She sat up, reached for it with trembling hands. This time, there was no crying. Only one word, whispered, repeated 3 times. Open. 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 She didn't sleep again that night. The next day at school, she noticed something she hadn't before. In the staff room, above the cubby where Mizuki's name had once appeared on the old homeroom board, was a bulletin from 6 years ago. It had yellowed, the tape corners peeling. Field trip, canceled due to incident. Class, 3B. Date, March 15th. She stared at it. Everyone else walked past it without even noticing, but to her, it was glowing. Wrong, out of place, forgotten on purpose. She decided to go back to B3, but this time she didn't bring tools or flashlights. She walked in during lunch break when everyone was distracted. She unlocked the door quickly, quietly. Inside, everything was just as she'd left it. Dust in the air, stale silence, desks unmoved, the same handprint on the window. And on Mizuki's desk, a new message, freshly carved. You brought it back. Ayumi's breath caught. She backed out slowly, locked the door again, and ran to the nurse's office under the pretense of feeling faint. She didn't feel sick. She felt watched. That night, another voicemail. Same time, but now something had changed. There were 2 voices. The first was Mizuki's, still soft, still broken. He said he would help me, but he watched me fall. Then came the second voice, a man's, raspy, whispering, closer to the microphone. You should have stayed out. Now you belong to her. Then the static returned and didn't stop. The message kept going. White noise, screeching feedback, hissing breath for nearly 10 minutes. Ayumi dropped the phone. It hit the ground with a crack but didn't turn off. The screen simply glitched, flickering between black and red, then shut itself off. She left it on the floor, walked into the bathroom, and vomited. In the mirror, her reflection seemed just slightly out of sync. When she turned her head, she was certain it moved a moment later. She covered the mirror with a towel. She didn't want to see herself anymore. Ayumi didn't go to school the next morning. She called in sick, said it was a migraine, which wasn't a lie, but wasn't the full truth either. Because how do you explain that your mind is unraveling one whisper at a time? That your reflection feels like it's watching you? That a dead girl knows your name? That a flip phone with no SIM keeps leaving voicemails that sound like your own voice, confessing things you've never done? There are no leave forms for being haunted. She sat curled on her couch, lights off, curtains drawn.
The flip phone lay on the coffee table, powered off, screen black. She'd taken out the battery. She didn't want to hear from it again. Not today. But the silence didn't help, because now her own thoughts were starting to whisper. She couldn't tell when the words in her head stopped being hers. I didn't mean to fall. You saw me. You looked away. Ayumi clutched her temples, squeezed her eyes shut. No, she wasn't there when Mizuki died. She didn't even work at the school back then. But somehow, it felt like she had watched anyway. Later that evening, Ayumi stood in front of her window, staring at the city below, headlights streaming past like silent ghosts. Her apartment felt smaller now, claustrophobic, like the walls had leaned in while she wasn't paying attention. Her phone buzzed. Not the flip phone, her personal one. New email. Subject, urgent. No sender. She opened it. There was no message body, only an attached audio file. She hesitated, then played it. Static, then a click, then a voice. Her own voice. I watched her fall. I thought it wasn't my place to interfere. I thought someone else would help. Ayumi's knees buckled. She dropped her phone, gasping. There was no way she had recorded that. No way anyone else could have. Unless you thought silence made you innocent, came a whisper from the speaker. But silence is just another kind of cruelty. Ayumi didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor, back to the wall, the unplugged flip phone on the table, the email still open on her screen, her heart thudding with a sick rhythm. She played the original voicemail again, the one from the flip phone, the one Mizuki left. It hurts. I didn't mean to fall. She looped it over and over. But this time, she was listening, not just to the voice, but to what was behind it. She boosted the volume, slowed the audio by 20%, layered the frequencies. And then she heard it, a second breath, not Mizuki's, deeper, male, sharp inhale, right before the final word, almost like someone had been standing next to her when she spoke, someone watching her leave that final message. Ayumi felt ice bloom in her spine. What if Mizuki hadn't been alone? What if she hadn't jumped? What if someone was there and said nothing? The next morning, Ayumi returned to school, pale, hollow-eyed, wearing the same blouse she'd worn 2 days ago. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't wave. She walked straight to the library. Miss Takahara was shelving books. I need old disciplinary records, 6 years ago, Class 3B. The librarian hesitated. You shouldn't. I need them. Something in Ayumi's voice stopped her. A moment later, the woman unlocked a drawer behind the desk. She returned with a thin brown folder, light, sparse. Inside, a few printouts, attendance charts, notes scribbled in red pen. One name had been circled repeatedly. Takao Fujimoto, male, age 17. Who is he? Ayumi asked. The librarian looked away. A student who transferred after Mizuki's death. Why? No one said, but some students claimed he was the last one who saw her alive. Ayumi found an old staff photo online that year, a class photo.
Third row, second from the left, Mizuki. And behind her, Takao, smirking, eyes half-lidded, his hand resting on the back of Mizuki's chair. She visited the student archives after hours, used her staff key to bypass the front lock. Inside the cabinet marked "Withdrawn 6 years ago," Ayumi found Takao's file. Incomplete, no forwarding address, no parent contact. But at the bottom, a brief memo. Student referred to counseling for suspected bullying incident. Unsubstantiated. Case closed after student's transfer. No details, no names, just silence. Just like always. That night, the voicemail came again. No number, no timestamp, just sound. This one started with footsteps, running, then a door slamming, then Mizuki's voice. "Please stop. Why are you laughing?" Then silence, then a sharp gasp, and the unexpected sound of wind rushing past a body. Then impact. Not a scream, not a thud, just silence. And then a final whisper layered faintly behind the noise. You all heard, but no one came. Ayumi fell to her knees, sobbing, not because of the horror of what she'd heard, but because the voice had started to sound less like Mizuki and more like her.
Ayumi stopped recognizing herself in mirrors. It began subtly, a delay in the reflection's blink, a flicker of movement after she'd already turned away. Then came the smile, faint, unnatural, a small curve at the corner of her mouth in the mirror that didn't match the grief carved into her real face. She stopped looking, started covering the bathroom mirror with a towel, used only her phone camera to fix her hair, drew her lipstick on by instinct. But the feeling remained, like something behind the glass was learning her, watching, mimicking, waiting for a moment to slip through. She returned to work with practiced silence. Her colleagues noticed her paleness, her quietness, but said nothing. She was still new, still adjusting, they assumed. But the students began to change. One boy burst into tears during roll call. Another girl fainted in the hallway, claiming the air had grown too heavy to breathe. 2 first-years refused to enter the west stairwell. They said a woman stood there late at night, crying, holding a phone. Ayumi didn't ask them to describe her. She already knew. The mirror in the nurse's office cracked one afternoon, spiderwebbed across its surface without anyone touching it. The nurse blamed age, but Ayumi heard whispers as the shards fell to the floor. Not voices, just breath, breathing in, as if something had just found its way out. The flip phone, which she now kept in a sealed envelope in her desk drawer, began vibrating even when it had no battery. At first she ignored it. Then one day, in the middle of a meeting with the school principal, she heard the sound. Click, flip, static. She excused herself mid-sentence, ran to her office, opened the drawer. The phone lay in the envelope, open, lit. The screen simply read, "Behind you." Ayumi perned, heart punching through her ribs. No one was there. But on her wall, just above her calendar, a crack had formed. Thin, hairline, like the first fracture in glass before it shatters. The days blurred after that. She stopped eating much, forgot which clothes she had worn, wrote notes to herself in her planner, only to find the handwriting changing.
looser, curved, childlike. Once she found the words, "I remember the window," written in red pen. She never used red pen, and she didn't remember writing it. She called Kaoru again, asked her to meet. They sat in a cafe near the river, brightly lit, filled with chatter. Ayumi still felt cold. "I think it's inside the phone," she whispered. Kaoru frowned. "What is?" "I don't know. Not Mizuki. Something older. Something hungry." Kaoru hesitated, then said, "You need to get rid of it. Burn it, smash it, whatever it takes." "I've tried. It comes back." Kaoru stared. Ayumi reached into her bag and placed the flip phone on the table. It was powered off, battery removed. Kaoru touched it, flinched. "It's warm. How is it warm?" That night, Ayumi dreamed of the classroom again. Only this time, it wasn't empty. Mizuki stood at the window, back turned. Her uniform was soaked, her hair matted. She was whispering something again and again. Ayumi tried to get closer, tried to hear, but when she reached her, Mizuki turned, and it wasn't her face. It was Ayumi's face. Mouth open, eyes weeping, voice hoarse. "Why didn't you stop me?" Ayumi woke up screaming. In the morning, her bedroom mirror had cracked down the middle, and written in condensation on the inside of the glass were 4 words. "I didn't fall alone." She went to the school security room that afternoon, asked to view footage from the hallway near classroom B3. "Just a routine check," she lied. "We had a parent complaint." The guard raised an eyebrow but pulled up the files. She watched the time-stamped feeds from the past 2 weeks. Nothing unusual, until 3:15 a.m. 3 nights ago. No one should have been in the building, but the camera flickered, and when it returned, a girl was standing outside B3. Long black hair, head bowed, uniform soaked. The flip phone in her hand. She lifted it slowly to her ear, listened, then looked directly at the camera. Ayumi gasped, because the girl had her face. She staggered out of the security room and vomited in the staff bathroom. When she looked up, the mirror was whole again, perfect. But her reflection was still smiling.
It started with a girl from Class 1C, a quiet, top-performing student named Ayuri, who always arrived early, who never broke the rules, who once stayed behind to help Ayumi carry counseling forms to the main office. On a rainy Monday morning, Ayuri fainted in the hallway outside classroom B3. No fever, no illness. Her pulse had been normal. But when the nurse asked her what she remembered, Ayuri simply whispered, "There was someone crying behind the door." Later, Ayumi checked the time on the nurse's report. 3:15 p.m. 12 hours from the usual call. Exactly. The next incident happened 3 days later. A boy from Class 2B left school during lunch and never returned. No one knew where he went. His parents were called. Police were involved. He came back the next day, shaken, confused, refusing to speak. Ayumi was asked to counsel him. She offered him tea. He wouldn't touch it. She asked him where he went. He only said, "I followed the sound of a phone ringing, but it wasn't mine." That night, she listened to the most recent voicemail again. It had come without a ringtone. No buzz, no alert, just appeared. a whisper on the screen. She played it. At first, nothing. Then her own voice. I should have warned her, but I thought it wouldn't happen again. I thought it was just me. Then came Mizuki's voice, almost layered on top of hers. It always happens again. Ayumi stared at the waveform on her laptop. The audio looked like a heartbeat, rising and falling, regular, timed. She zoomed out, compared it to the older voicemails. Every message, every cry, whisper, static loop had the same pattern of rise and fall, same rhythm, same length, exactly 3 minutes and 15 seconds. 3:15. Time of death, time of message, time of pattern. Ayumi pulled up her logbook. She hadn't meant to keep track, but she had written down each student incident in her notes. Panic attacks, vanishing students, cries heard from empty rooms. They always occurred at 3:15. AM, PM, didn't matter. Always that time. She returned to the 3rd floor, stood outside B3, listened. She heard nothing. Not today, but the air. It buzzed, like static under the skin, the kind of pressure you feel before a storm, except it never rains. She looked at her watch. 3:13 p.m. 2 minutes. She waited, one footstep at a time. And at 3:15, her phone vibrated. She answered it, against her better judgment. Hello? No voice. Just breathing. Then, you're getting closer. That evening, Ayumi sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, a whiteboard covered in timelines and names behind her. Mizuki, Takao Fujimoto, Aili, 2B-boy, Mr. Nakatani, herself. She was trying to build a map of guilt, of silence, of those who heard, saw, but turned away. She saw a pattern forming, not of victims, of witnesses, and the voice was coming for all of them. She dug through old disciplinary files again, found one from 8 years ago. Different student, different case. Another unexplained fall, another note that never surfaced, another teacher reassigned after an incident. And again, March 15th. She traced back a decade, always the same day, always the same time. Not every year, but enough. A haunting tied not to a place, but to a pattern. Like a loop, rewinding, replaying, reinfecting. And now, she was caught in it. Ayumi emailed Kaoru again. Subject: what if this isn't just a ghost? What if this is a warning that keeps failing, and I'm next in line? Kaoru replied an hour later. One sentence. Then you need to break the loop. But how do you break a loop when you don't know where it begins or where you end? That night, the voicemail came in 5 minutes early, 3:10 a.m. It was Mizuki again, clearer than ever. I was pushed, not off the ledge, into silence. A pause. Then, that's what kills us, not the fall, the silence. Ayumi lay awake until morning. She didn't dream. But when she finally rose to shower, there were tiny cracks in her mirror again. This time, not random. They formed a shape, the outline of an eye, watching. It was a Thursday when the boy disappeared. His name was Shun, 2nd year, class 2A, 14 years old, thin, soft-spoken, the kind of student who blended into the background, never causing trouble, never drawing attention, until he vanished between 2nd and 3rd period.
One moment he was seated by the window. The next, his desk was empty. His classmates said they didn't see him leave. No bathroom pass, no hallway log, no footprints, no signs. He simply wasn't there anymore. Ayumi found out at 12:40 p.m. The vice principal sent an urgent staff-wide message. "A possible runaway," he wrote. "Please remain calm." But Ayumi's heart sank, not because she feared the worst, but because, when she glanced at her phone, there was a missed call. Time, 12:39 p.m. Caller, unknown. She hadn't heard it ring. There was no voicemail left, just silence in the log. But she knew the pattern now, and Shun was already gone. She ran to the security office, forced a smile, said she was just checking in case he was seen in the hallway. The guard, by now familiar with her unusual requests, didn't ask questions. They pulled up footage from the third floor, the corridor near the west wing. At 12:37 p.m., the feed glitched, static for 6 seconds. Then it returned. Shun was walking alone, straight down the hallway, toward classroom B3. Ayumi leaned in. His pace was slow. His arms hung unnaturally by his sides, as though he were sleepwalking. He stopped at the locked door, tilted his head, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a small object, held it to his ear, a flip phone, black, identical. He pressed it to his ear, listening. Then he vanished from frame. No one came, no door opened. He was just gone. The footage ended. The guard scratched his head. Weird, must have skipped. But Ayumi was already running down the stairs. She found the hallway empty, classroom B3 still sealed, still labeled storage, still locked, but the dust just outside the door was smudged. Fresh footprints, small, like Shun's. She pressed her hand to the door. It was warm, as if someone had been inside only moments ago. She knocked, once, twice, then pressed her ear to the wood. This time she heard music, not a song, a school chime, but warped, slowed, playing backward, like the sound memory makes when it's trying to forget. She stepped back, breathing unsteady. Then her phone buzzed. A message. From Shun. Time, 12:45 p.m. But she didn't have his number saved. She opened the message. It was blank, only an audio file attached. She pressed play. Breathing. A sob. Then Shun's voice. "I'm with her now. She says it's better here. No more silence." Ayumi's blood turned to ice. Then a second voice joined his, higher, younger, familiar. He listened, so I let him in. That night, Ayumi dreamed of a hallway with no end. Every classroom door was locked, every window fogged. She walked and walked until she found a desk standing alone in the middle of the hallway. Shun was sitting at it, head down, eyes closed. Behind him, Mizuki stood, with her fingers on his shoulders, like she was guiding him or anchoring him. Ayumi tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come, because in her hand was a phone, recording, not helping, just recording. She woke up with the sound of the voicemail already playing on her phone, this time without prompt. The phone had turned on by itself. "You saw him walk away. You did nothing, just like before." Then came a whisper so low she had to press the phone to her ear. "It's your turn." At school, they found Shun the next morning, not dead, but changed.
He had been curled in the corner of the nurse's office storage closet, silent, eyes wide open, fingernails torn from scratching at the walls. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't move. They called it temporary dissociation, but when Ayumi visited him, he looked at her, smiled, and whispered, "Did you get my message?" Then he began to hum, slow, off-key, the same school chime from the voicemail. Later, Ayumi went back to the flip phone. She powered it on. One new message, 3:15 a.m., from unknown. This time there was no voice, only static, and over the static, the faint sound of scratching, metal on wood, like someone carving into a desk. Then a whisper, clear, "I can use anyone now, even you."
The static changed. It wasn't just white noise anymore. It had shape, a pulse, layers, as if the silence between words had become its own voice, and it was learning to speak. Ayumi first noticed it during a routine student check-in. A boy in Class 1B had begun humming in the middle of their conversation. Not just humming, the tune, the backward school chime, slowed, dragged, almost mournful. He didn't seem aware. When she gently asked why he was doing it, he blinked in confusion. "I don't remember," he said. Later, she played the most recent voicemail back to herself, and underneath Mizuki's voice, layered barely above the static, "Don't stop listening. Don't stop listening." Not one voice, but many, different pitches, some clear, some struggling, some crying. They were multiplying. By the end of the week, 4 students had been referred to Ayumi for sudden emotional breakdowns. One girl screamed during a math quiz because she swore she saw a face in her desk reflection. Another boy locked himself in the music room, playing the same piano chord again and again until his fingers bled. And a third student, barely 9 years old, walked to the third-floor west wing in the middle of class and simply stood outside classroom B3 for 37 minutes. When asked what he was doing, he whispered, "I heard them. They were calling your name." Ayumi avoided the mirrors at school now, even the ones in the bathrooms. But sometimes she caught glimpses of her reflection anyway, in windows, in polished floors, in turned-off computer screens. And every time the eyes were just slightly wrong. Too wide, too dark, too still. Like someone else was wearing her face, watching, waiting for something. The flip phone buzzed constantly now, even without a battery. She stopped trying to explain it. Kaoru had gone silent. Her last message had been, "Whatever this is, it's spreading through attention, through observation. Stop listening." But Ayumi couldn't, because now the students were listening too, and once they heard it, the messages began coming for them. She started hearing the static without the phone, in stairwells, in the nurse's office, beneath the hum of the hallway lights. Once, during morning assembly, the school speaker system glitched, a burst of feedback. Then, unexplainably, a voice whispered through the mic, "Sensei." Hundreds of students turned their heads in unison, eyes searching, not afraid, just expectant. Ayumi had to leave the room. She vomited in the staff bathroom and cried quietly into her sleeve. Later that day, she played back the assembly recording from her phone.
She hadn't meant to record it. The app had opened by itself. The file was labeled 315 many.wave. She pressed play, and this time there was no Mizuki. Only a chorus of whispers, layered, colliding, some shouting, some sobbing, one repeating, "I didn't mean to see." Another, "He told me not to tell." Then, her own voice. "They're all speaking through me." That night, Ayumi sat at her desk, lights off, window cracked open to the cold. She wrote down every name, every incident, every timestamp. The paper shook in her hand, because the pattern was no longer about Mizuki. It was about everyone who listened but stayed quiet, everyone who saw something and walked away. And now the spirits had found their medium, not just through phones, but through sound itself. She tried to call Kaoru again. The line rang once, then played a voicemail in Kaoru's voice. "I hear them too now. They're inside the tone, inside the silence between words. Don't reply, or you'll let them through." The line went dead. Ayumi sat in her apartment, phone clutched in both hands, and for the first time she began to question whether she was still herself. Because when she whispered, "I'm listening," it didn't feel like her voice. It felt like someone else's, speaking through her. That night, the voicemail arrived at 3:12 a.m., earlier again. It was different this time. No static, just voices, all overlapping, all whispering different names. Ayumi recognized every one of them. Former students, forgotten transfers, expelled kids, absent teachers, faint names in old yearbooks. And then, a new name. Whispered 3 times. Ayumi. 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 She didn't sleep. She sat up until morning, watching the wall opposite her bed, because there, in the soft morning light, she saw something new. Thin cracks spidering across the paint. Just like the mirror, just like the hallway tiles. Except these cracks were in the shape of a mouth. Open, mid-scream. She didn't recognize herself anymore. Not in the mirror, not in photographs, not in her own memory. It was subtle at first. She'd glance at her reflection and feel a fraction of delay, like a buffering video or a puppet reacting just a second too late. Her smile wouldn't land where her lips were. Her eyes didn't blink at the same time. Her posture shifted even when she stood still. Then came the whispers, not from outside, but inside her. Breaths between her own thoughts, finishing her sentences before she could, filling the silences with words she didn't want to hear. "You looked away. You always look away. No one's innocent in the end." One morning, Ayumi caught herself staring into the mirror above her sink for almost 20 minutes, not brushing her teeth, not washing her face, just staring, unmoving, unblinking. And when she did blink, her reflection didn't. She dropped the mirror onto the floor, glass shattering like brittle ice. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just swept up the shards in silence. In one broken piece, she saw her own eye distorted, and behind it another face. Just for a moment, not hers. She avoided mirrors completely after that, but the reflections followed her, in elevator doors, in darkened windows, in the puddles on the walkway outside the school. She started seeing her reflection smiling when she wasn't. She began walking faster, talking less, sleeping with the lights on. But the haunting had already reached her, not just spiritually, physically. She found bruises on her arms that she didn't remember getting, red marks around her neck as though someone had gripped her in her sleep. On the back of her hand, 4 lines carved faintly into the skin. Not a wound, a message. You opened it. The flip phone had begun turning on without her touching it. She locked it in a metal box, buried it in her freezer. Still, it rang. At 3:15 a.m., every night, 1 voicemail per day, no matter what she did. And the voice had changed again. Now it was almost entirely hers, but altered, sharpened, too calm. They left her alone. You're alone too. Let me help you understand. She sat at her kitchen table, no longer trying to stop the spiral. Her apartment smelled like burnt dust and cold metal. Her phone buzzed again. New recording saved, 3:17 a.m. She hadn't opened her phone, she hadn't touched anything, and yet the audio was there. She pressed play. At first, only breathing. Then footsteps, a door creaking open, and finally, her own voice. "What are you doing?" Another voice, also hers. "What you never did. Listening." She backed away from the phone. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. She wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat like it no longer belonged to her. She reached for her phone again, opened the front camera to check herself. But what looked back wasn't her. Same face, but wrong. Expressionless. Empty. Eyes locked straight ahead. And then, the reflection smiled. Ayumi dropped the phone. It clattered across the floor, screen cracking on the tile. She collapsed next to it, sobbing. And through the phone speaker came the voice again. "Almost ready now. Soon you'll remember everything." The next day, she didn't go to school. She sat on her bed, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the wall. No mirrors, no screens, but she could feel her own body shifting, like her mind was receding and something else was stepping in. She whispered to herself to keep anchored. "My name is Ayumi Hayasaka. I'm 28 years old. I work at Kuroyama High School." But every time she said the words, she felt less certain, less present, like she was rehearsing a role she no longer understood. At 3:15 a.m., the power in her apartment went out. Total silence, except for the click of the flip phone in the freezer. It had turned on. She opened the freezer door slowly. The screen glowed in the frost. New voicemail. She pressed play. This time, the voice was a child's, a little girl. Soft, curious. "Are you the new sensei? Will you stay with me this time?" A pause. Then the girl asked, "What's it like to fall?" Ayumi closed the freezer door, sat down in the dark, and whispered to herself again. "My name is Ayumi. My name..." But the words were fading, being replaced. The next morning, when she passed a shop window, she didn't see her reflection at all. Just a girl in a school uniform, standing, staring, holding a flip phone to her ear. There is a kind of haunting that doesn't come from anger, but from something quieter, something deeper, something left unfinished. Ayumi's breath fogged the window pane as she watched the sun disappear behind Kuroyama's rooftops. She hadn't gone to school in 3 days. She hadn't spoken to anyone. Her voice had grown so unused that it came out hoarse when she tried. "My name is..." She stopped. She couldn't finish the sentence anymore, because the voice in her head always finished it for her. "You're mine now." But that night, something changed. An email arrived on her phone with no subject line, no sender, only a link. An archived newspaper article from March 2004, over 2 decades ago. The headline read, "High school girl found dead after mysterious phone incident." The details were sparse. A student in a different district had begun receiving voicemails at night. She claimed to hear the voice of a dead classmate. Days later, she was found lying face up on her school's roof, a broken flip phone in her hand. The cause of death was ruled as psychological collapse followed by accidental fall. No criminal charges filed. The article ended with one haunting line. A local monk suggested a failed kuchizuke no owari, a ritual of closure when words of grief are left unsaid. Ayumi reread the phrase, kuchizuke no owari, the final mouth, the closing of a voice, a ritual that seals last words between the dead and the living, a severance, if done properly, if done at all. She followed the thread, found mentions on esoteric forums, fragments in old Japanese spiritual texts. The ritual was simple in structure, but devastating in meaning. It required the retracing of the last conversation, one person to listen without interruption, one to speak their final truth, and then both had to say, "I hear you, now rest." Anything less, and the spirit would stay open, looping, repeating, calling again and again, until someone answered properly. Ayumi returned to school that night, alone. She didn't tell anyone, didn't bring a flashlight, only the flip phone and a piece of chalk. The third-floor hallway felt different now. The air was heavy. Every door was shut, except B3. Its lock was broken. The door cracked slightly open, as if it had been waiting. Ayumi stepped inside. No dust this time. The desks were all turned to face the windows. The air was cold, not like winter, but like memory, frozen in place. She walked slowly to the far right corner, Mizuki's desk. The carving was still there. "I didn't mean to fall." Ayumi placed the flip phone on the wood. She sat in the chair in front of it, pressed record, and began to speak. "I'm listening now. I wasn't there for you, Mizuki. I didn't know how to help, but I hear you, and I'm sorry I was late." She waited, for seconds, minutes. Then, the phone screen glowed. Live call, connected. No number, just static. Then Mizuki's voice. "I didn't jump. I called, but no one answered. I was already dead before I fell. It wasn't the roof. It was the silence." Ayumi's voice cracked. "I hear you now. Now rest." The call ended. No beep, just stillness. For the first time in weeks, the flip phone turned off and stayed off. Ayumi stayed seated for a long time. The air in the room felt lighter, but not empty, not cleansed, just quieter, as though the loop had broken, but the echo remained. She stood, turned to leave, and froze. Standing in the doorway was a shadow. Not Mizuki, but another, taller, heavier, smiling. Takao Fujimoto. Only not as he looked in the yearbook, but older, twisted. His mouth stretched too wide, his voice deep and broken. You didn't ask me what I said to her before she fell. Ayumi couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He stepped into the room, but as he did, the phone on Mizuki's desk lit up again, and from it came dozens of voices, not just Mizuki, but all the others. We see you. We remember. We're not afraid anymore. The shadow paused, twitched, cracked, then vanished. Ayumi collapsed to her knees, sobbing, not in fear, but in release. As the sun began to rise over Tokyo, the light hit the window of classroom B3 for the first time in years, and for a moment, it glowed. The phone didn't ring that night. For the first time in over a month, 3:15 a.m. came and went in silence. No voicemail, no whisper, no static. Just the still hum of the city outside Ayumi's window, and the thundering sound of her own heartbeat in the dark. She didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, half expecting the silence to split in two, for the phone to vibrate without power again, for a voice that wasn't hers to slip past her lips. But nothing came, and in that silence, something became clear. It wasn't over. It had just changed. She got out of bed, barefoot, still in her school clothes from the day before. She walked slowly to the desk where the flip phone now lay, silent, still, cold. She stared at it, and for a moment she thought, "It's really done." But then her own phone lit up, not the flip phone, her personal phone. One new voicemail, 3:15 a.m., from unknown. She didn't hesitate. She pressed play, breathing, no static. Then, "You should have left when you had the chance." It was her voice, tired, empty, desperate. Then came another line, spoken just above a whisper. "You didn't break the loop. You became it." Ayumi's hand trembled. She looked around her apartment, suddenly aware of how unfamiliar it felt. The colors on the walls too dull, the air too still, the shadows too thick. And in the reflection of her television screen, black, turned off, she saw a figure standing behind her. She turned quickly. No one was there. But in the faint outline on the screen, the reflection hadn't moved. It still stood, smiling. She ran to the mirror, uncovered it. Her reflection looked back at her. For the first time in days, it seemed normal. But when she tilted her head, it didn't follow. It watched, then whispered, lips not moving. "You're not just hearing the messages anymore. You're making them." Ayumi staggered back, fell to the floor. The voicemail was still playing. It had changed. Now it was filled with dozens of voices, all hers, all different emotions, screaming, whispering, crying, begging, a layered chorus of Ayumi calling herself, and at the center of it, Mizuki's voice, calm, almost kind. You listened. You let us in. Now we'll never be silent again. The flip phone on her desk vibrated violently, despite still having no battery. It lit up. Incoming call, 3:15 a.m. She moved to pick it up, but before she could touch it, the screen shattered. A spiderweb of cracks bloomed outward. From beneath the glass, blood began to seep, slowly, thickly. Ayumi stumbled backward. The cracks in the mirror spread behind her. The voice from the voicemail repeated, "I should have left. I should have left. I should have left." Ayumi screamed, not in fear, but in recognition, because she knew now there was no haunted phone, no haunted classroom, not anymore. The haunting had found a new vessel, her. Back at school, classroom B3 remained sealed. After that night, no more students broke down. No more voicemails arrived. No more incidents. But Ayumi never returned. She stopped answering emails. Her apartment lease was terminated. Her number disconnected. No forwarding address. Gone. 1 week later, a new school counselor was hired. Young, energetic, hopeful. On her first day, she opened her desk drawer and found something inside. An old black flip phone. No battery, no SIM. Just one saved voicemail. She played it, and from the speaker, a woman's voice, tired, broken, familiar. "My name is Ayumi Hayasaka, and if you're hearing this, it's already too late."
They called it a storage room again. Sealed, quiet, neutral. It's easier that way, to rename the wound, to bury the noise under something practical, to pretend the silence means the pain has stopped. Classroom B3 no longer existed on the school's internal map, just a blank rectangle. No label, no room number. The hallway lights near it were dimmer now, no matter how often maintenance replaced the bulbs. Students walked faster when passing it. Teachers avoided that end of the building entirely. And still, despite all of it, every night at 3:15 a.m., the cleaning crew reported the same thing. A door slightly ajar. A faint hum, like a ringtone slowed to half speed. And a desk light, flickering inside. The new counselor was named Rika. Freshly graduated, bright-eyed, organized. She didn't believe in ghosts, not really. She believed in structure, in resilience, in learning from pain. But that belief began to falter the moment she found the flip phone in her desk drawer. At first, she thought it was trash, some leftover from a previous staff member. No battery, no signal, no SIM. Still, curiosity pulled her thumb to the open button, and the screen lit up. Just once. Just long enough to show voicemail 1. Date unknown. Duration 3:15. She pressed play. The message was strange. A woman's voice. Calm, flat, but exhausted. "My name is Ayumi Hayasaka. I was the counselor here before you. If you're hearing this, You've already begun to feel it, haven't you? The stillness, the glances that linger too long, the breath on your neck when no one's there. I thought I could fix it. I thought listening would be enough. But I was wrong. It doesn't want help. It wants memory. It wants to be remembered. The voice crackled with static, then softened. And once you remember, you can't forget. The phone powered off, wouldn't turn back on. Rika laughed uneasily and tossed it in her desk drawer. But the next morning, it was back on top, screen glowing. One new message. In the months that followed, the school changed little. Students passed their exams, teachers handed out worksheets. Rain fell, sakura bloomed, but sometimes, on the edge of things, you'd hear crying where there shouldn't be any, or find desks with fingernail scratches beneath them, or notice your own name whispered faintly in the hum of the intercom when no one else was in the room. And once, during a fire drill evacuation, a teacher doing head count realized a boy was missing. Shun, second year. He hadn't been enrolled for almost a year, but his name had appeared again on the class roster. Typed in, not handwritten. No one knew who entered it. No one could delete it. Back in the sealed classroom, everything remained frozen. The broken desk, the cracked window, the words still etched faintly into the wood. I didn't mean to fall. And next to it, a second carving. Newer, deeper, familiar. I listened. Now I stay. The flip phone still rings sometimes. Always at 3:15 a.m. And if you answer, you'll hear a voice that sounds like yours, saying things you haven't said yet, confessing things you haven't done yet, promising to be better, to speak up next time, to help the next one who falls. But you won't, because you're not the first. You won't be the last, and the line is never disconnected. Some doors don't need keys to open, only attention, only silence, only someone willing to listen. And if you ever find yourself standing outside a locked classroom at night, hearing a phone ring from the other side, don't answer it, no matter what you hear, no matter who it sounds like. Because by the time you do, you won't be the one listening anymore. You'll be the one speaking.